This is Mike Tatarsky, host of the Vietnam Weekly podcast and author of the Vietnam Weekly newsletter. I said at the end of last week's episode that I would be back in 2 weeks, but scheduling allowed me to have a new episode today, which I'm very happy about. I've been a big fan of movies for as long as I can remember, from watching Blockbuster VHS rentals with my family while growing up to frequently going to see movies at the theater through high school and college. Unfortunately, I've never quite connected with Vietnamese cinema despite living here for over a decade. I've seen a handful of very good movies produced here, some of which you'll hear discussed later, but most offerings at local theater chains are pretty unappealing to me personally. This isn't surprising. The biggest domestic hits at the Vietnamese box office last year were almost all about family-related topics. That's a cultural divide that can be difficult for foreign audiences to cross. All that being said, I'm keenly interested in the future development of Vietnamese cinema. I'd certainly like to watch more local movies instead of largely sticking with releases from the US, Europe, or more developed Asian cinema industries. To learn more about this world and examine whether my view of current Vietnamese movie offerings is off base at all, I've had my eye on today's guest for a while. Nguyên Le is an entertainment writer, copy editor, translator, and occasional screenwriter. He's written for publications including Slash Film, The Houston Chronicle, Film Threat, and Paste Magazine. He's also a member of both the Houston Film Critics Society and the Hollywood Critics Association, one of the few Asian members in their ranks. And I should note he's from Ho Chi Minh City originally. We discussed how Nguyen got into movies, which I found to be a very endearing origin story, the evolution of Vietnamese cinema over time, censorship, steps the industry could take to improve its standing both here and internationally, and his recommendations for essential contemporary Vietnamese movies that people can check out. As always, if you have any comments, feedback, or guest ideas, get in touch at matatarsky@gmail.com. Let's get to my conversation with Nguyen. Nguyen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. So, I've been a fan of a fan of your work through the written word and also through this program as well. So, it's finally great to be, how do you say it? Like on the other side of the curtain, so to speak. So, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we'll start with a, straightforward question. How did you get into movies, and what led you to becoming a professional critic?
Oh my gosh! All right, I've been You know, every subsequent time that I get to ask this, I believe that my answer has become more and more concise. So, let's see how this goes. All right, so it's all started when my parents or even like my cousins, they would like to watch English speaking films, knowing that they would be much better than the Asian dramas that they've been watching. But they're English shy, so oftentimes they would reluctant to watch those, even though that they know that they're better. So fortunately, I responded well to English, and vice versa. English finds me okay to be friends with, and so one day I decided that that film that they would really like to watch, I would just ask them to go ahead and play it. Just turn on the English subtitles, sit next to me, and then I'll read off the screen the English subtitles, and then I'll translate it to them in Vietnamese throughout the whole film. So one film became 10 film became 100. But throughout that journey, and I guess because I'm much of a perfectionist myself, so I would watch a film multiple times just to make sure that I get the translations right. And from watching a single film multiple times, I maybe inadvertently try to analyze the film as well. Like, why did that, particular scene work for me? Why was so and so like this and that? Like, and I was analyzing and I was critiquing the film. like in its earliest forms, like in the most rudimentary way of seeing a film, basically. And yeah, well, one thing led to another. I decided that, hey, maybe I can turn this from a hobby into a proper career. And I would say that's basically that's what happens. And also, if I may add, the fact that whenever I was trying to learn about film criticism, I would search for resources and materials. I look around and I noticed that, especially at the time, there were no other critics of Vietnamese descent writing about films in English. And so I was like, well, maybe I can, maybe I can be one, basically. And there we go. I hope that was concise enough.
Yeah, no, no, that's great. I mean, it's a really interesting kind of origin story. So how did you actually get into like break into being a critic then? I mean, I think you studied journalism. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what were kind of how did you get into that world?
So at around, let me try to jog my memory a bit. At the end of 2011, yeah, that's right. At the end of 2011, I got the opportunity to fly over to the US to study journalism at the University of Houston. And while I was there, I noticed that the school newspaper was revamping its arts section, and I was like, maybe that would be my way in. So I started out writing, film reviews for the for particular for said arts section, and it was there at the screening that I realized that there are certain faces in the crowd that I feel like I should meet. I feel like I should go up and talk to. Initially, it was just trying to find like-minded folks in a new town and in a new place in a new environment. But just from talking with them and just from hanging out with them, I realized that some of them are members of the Houston Film Critics Society, and I was just like, I was surprised. I was surprised at the very concept of, wait, there is such a thing as a critic society. I should join and see, what's all that about. So yeah, I began to attend more screenings, and seeing those same faces, and eventually I was trying to look for a way in, balancing out my time between being a student and being a film critic, and also being a journalist as well. So I was dividing myself into threes, basically. So yeah, that's how it went. And also, if I may add, at the time when I joined in, I was also the only uh Houston Critic Society member who is of Asian descent and obviously of Vietnamese descent.
Yeah, I get the sense that's kind of been a theme through your career so far, unfortunately. So, yeah, I know you said you kind of started watching movies with your family, Hollywood movies, I suppose. And I know you've written reviews for a lot of Hollywood movies, but I do want to focus more on Vietnamese cinema, this being a, you know, Vietnam focused podcast. So how have you seen Vietnamese cinema evolve kind of, I guess, in the 10, 15 years or so since you've worked as a critic?
This is a very interesting question because because to me, I find that when we mention evolution, it's that word to me is always suggests that it is traceable and it is like a continuous process. But to me, Vietnamese
Mm.
cinema is both. Is the word evolve or evolution? It is a word that is both applicable and non-applicable to Vietnamese cinema. it is non-applicable in the sense that, whenever I look back and whenever I try to do additional research about the Vietnamese cinema, especially to write for English-speaking publications, I would always find gaps. I would always find, information that's missing because it is representative of Vietnamese history as well, going through a lot of changes, going through a lot of big cultural shifts. But where the word evolve, where the notion of evolving or evolution also applies to Vietnamese cinema, to me is where it's because it's a natural kind of thing. Over time, things have to things have to improve. Technology changes, and so Vietnamese cinema also follows
Hmm.
in that sense. But however, by saying that, I will also say that if there's any evolution in Vietnamese cinema, it has always been much heavier on the technical front more than the substance centric kind of department, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that, improved production and cinematography and things like that, but maybe not plot. Maybe not as much progress on plot and things like that.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Because what I would say is that, at the, until this day, and because through a lot of factors as well, Vietnamese cinema, or actually, Vietnamese relationship to cinema has always been like, I'm going to the cinema for, just to kill some time. I'm going to the cinema just to, have fun. I'm going to the cinema just for entertainment. And I mean, that isn't that isn't wrong, you know? Like because cinema after all is entertainment. However, I feel like we real evolution would only happen when, the people's interaction with cinema can move beyond just being, treating it as a form of entertainment, because that's what the Korea or Thai or Japan cinema scenes have managed to do. They realize that yes, we are creating entertainment, but at the same time, we added, let's just call it like we added enough values or layers on top of said entertainment product so that it can be also a cultural representative in a way. And
Hmm.
so I would say that's the next step that Vietnamese cinema need to do. People who interacted with Vietnamese cinema need to do just so that they can see genuine evolution.
Well, then, I mean, I guess you've sort of partially answered this next question, which I admit is quite broad. But what's your take on kind of the current state of Vietnamese cinema? Again, I realize that's very broad. The movie industry here is, tiny compared to Hollywood, but there's still a lot. Personally, I will say, I mean, I love movies, but I don't engage much with Vietnamese cinema. I mean, I have seen some movies that I think are pretty good, but generally when I go on CGV's website, I don't think much looks very interesting to me personally. But what do you think of how things are?
The current state of Vietnamese movies, I would say it's just again because it is still a very like entertainment heavy kind of like activity or concept to people. And so the current state of Vietnamese movies are usually just jam packed with comedies or films that would
Hmm.
evoke the word the first word or the first trait that would pop into your head whenever you see a Vietnamese movie is that it's fun, as in, but
Hmm.
fun here being like fun in a ha ha like overtly comedic kind of way. That is always like the main thing. But then I would say that there have been experimentations. There have been like expansions into other genres, and we seem to be we seem to be kind of like doing the most intense sort of exploration when you look at how many Vietnamese horror movies are there, and especially with how many Vietnamese horror films that are going to projects that are going to be coming out next year. According to a source of mine, they said that next year we're gonna see 17 Vietnamese horror projects, and
Hmm.
I would say that I'm both impressed and interested, intrigued, basically.
So why do you think horror is? I mean, is it just because that's a pretty entertaining genre? I mean, I do notice that there are a lot of horror movies. Why do you think that's kind of caught on so much?
Gosh, where to begin? I would say that there are a lot of factors that lead to this, but the first thing I would say is that from attending a lot of film festivals, both local and abroad, and from talking to people who are there, I realized that they are saying that there's this consensus where horror seems to be like the smartest investment. The horror seems to be the genre that is the most welcoming to a lot of filmmakers at all levels, both entry and experience.
Mm,
And from that notion, it uncovers another one where a lot of people would say that, horror is a genre where from the premise alone, and just by, revealing the premise alone to people, to investors, or to other creatives, you get their interest immediately. Whereas opposed to other genres, you review the premise and then they would always follow up with, additional questions like who's starring in it, like where you're going to be filming in it. Like they keep trying to find a unique selling point, basically, and you have to provide them that. Whereas for horror, all you need to do is just to provide the premise and then, they're hooked. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that I would say that and this is very strictly, I would say it's a very Vietnamese thing where yes, even though censorship is still there,
mm,
I would say that, over time we have opened up a little bit more. And so people feel that, finally they can make, they can the horror stories that they've always wanted to tell on screen. The filmmakers, they now can feel that, they can tell something that is closer to their
mm,
original intention and original vision, as opposed to finding themselves, for example, like say around 5 or 6 years ago, all they could do for their horror films is to make it as good of a at the very best. Their horror notion can only be a very good thriller. So limitations are still there, but they've been eroded over time a little bit, and I find that they find that yes, this is our time, this is a window. So let me just hop onto it and scare people. Good.
okay. So you mentioned censorship, which, of course, this kind of can't be avoided. I don't want to dwell on it too much. There's plenty of examples, both for Hollywood movies. Perhaps most infamously in the last couple of years, the Barbie was banned here because of the alleged depiction of the China's 9 dash line and a map in the movie. And then, of course, lower profile issues with some Vietnamese movies. But so we got coffee a few weeks ago, and you mentioned how there's actually more of a system to how that works with movies here. I was hoping you could kind of describe that a little bit and kind of just well, you already said this a little bit that censorship has eroded a little bit, but how does that work here now?
I would say that way back when, let's just say 5, 7, maybe even 10 or so years ago. But obviously, the further back, the truer this will be. But film for both from local filmmakers and films that are imported abroad, they would always be subjected to censorship, and if there are any cuts made, they would always be done, or any adjustment made, they would always be done based on, the temperament or the core values of the censor. So it is a very, personal decisions deciding in terms of deciding what to show or what not to show, what can be shown and what can't be shown. But over time, fast forward until the modern day, specifically now in 2023, I believe the specifications for classification of film, they are more clearer over time. For example, like I'm reading here right now in 2023. Finally, there are like 6 classifications, 6 levels of classifications for a film. Whereas before there's no such thing. A film is either shown or not shown, banned or not banned. But now there are like 6 different classifications for the government, the censors, and the audiences to interact with. So, for example, there's P, where it is popularized for all ages. K, where it's it is the equivalent of PG-13. We have T13, where you must be 13 and above to see. T16 is 16 and above. 18 is T18 is 18 and above. And C, which is the equivalent of an X rating in the US, where it is oh wait, no. I think X-rated films are still allowed to be shown, but however, they won't make any money. But however, for C here in Vietnam, it's just that it's bad. And regarding placing a film, which films into which classification overall, and from what I'm reading here as well, it says that a film is sorted. A film has 7 criteria to consider. 1, there is content. 2, violence. 3, nudity. 4, the presence of substances. 5, horror elements. 6, profanity. And 7, in terms of dangerous and easily imitable behaviors.
Yeah, I was gonna say it has been interesting to see this evolve somewhat over time. I mean, we talked about how the movie, the body horror movie from 2024, The Substance, screened here, much to my shock. And yeah, I mean, they did blur some nudity, but generally, the horror was there. And I feel like years ago that movie certainly would not have been released. I think it performed very poorly, unsurprisingly, in the box office here, but at least you could see it. So, kind of moving into some, I guess, maybe a few specific movies. I mean, over the last 5 years or so, there have been some Vietnamese movies that have done very well at overseas film festivals. I'm thinking of like Rom, for example. There's another movie called Taste that I think won an award at the Berlin Film Festival, maybe. Both of those actually ran into kind of trouble here at home. I think Rom had some issue with distribution or something along those lines. Anyway, but what do you make of kind of the success of a handful of Vietnamese movies overseas in recent years?
From my perspective, it's always great to see Vietnamese films doing well abroad because, again, from attending film festivals, whenever people, they discovered that I am from Vietnam or I have knowledge about Vietnamese cinema, they would always come up to me, and then they would always ask me like, "Hey, I know one of 2 ways. It's either, hey, I know nothing about Vietnamese cinema, so can we connect? Or 2, it would be like, I know about Vietnamese cinema, but then I have no local, contact or liaison there. Would you like to connect?" So on a semi-related note, the fact that Vietnamese films or Vietnamese productions, they find international success, that is great. That is always a great thing because it helps me, answer that question for them in an indirect manner. At the same time, I do realize that, a lot of Vietnamese films that have found international success, they always tend to be international co-productions. For example, we would have partners from Singapore or the Philippines or even Korea, so on and so forth. And that stirs up a debate where a lot of people they would say that is that actually a Vietnamese movie, or how Vietnamese is that film when there are certain elements that in the footage where clearly it has to it is a representative of the Vietnamese visions or the Vietnamese filmmakers having to cater to their production to their foreign production partners. But anyway, that's another story. But on a most surface level, I'm always happy to see Vietnamese movies they're doing well abroad because for a very simple reason, I guess. I try to write about the presence of Vietnamese cinema abroad, and whenever these films they become a news topic, then I have something to write about. Basically, I need more Vietnamese films to be successful abroad just so that I won't be unemployed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good personal reason. Well, so on that note, I mean, what do you think? What do you think the cinema industry here kind of needs to do to level up, to take bigger steps, both domestically and overseas, I guess.
Gosh. This is one of those questions where I'm sure that if you ask different people in the industry, then you'll get different answers. But the one that you get from me, I think, in order to level up, well, I would say that there are maybe two ways that Vietnamese cinema can do in order to level itself up. The first one is, and we address this, people who are involved, parties who are involved with with Vietnamese cinema, they need to realize that there's more than the film that they are making. It can be more than entertainment, because like I said, people keep if you keep treating it as entertainment, if you keep treating films as an entertainment device or a vessel for joy, then that will it will be that. It will be just that. But other cinema scenes have managed to see that, hey, it can be a cultural offering, but on the big screen. That is why a lot of core values are embedded cinematically. A lot of cultural contexts are woven in, again, cinematically. So a film, not only at the end of the day gets to entertain audiences worldwide, but also they get to educate worldwide audiences about a particular culture as well. And the second thing is that we really need to improve the visual vocabulary in the process of making and producing a film, because I don't know why, but this is very interesting, and I only see this in Vietnamese films of today. And it is actually kind of like I would say, a bug in a lot of films in other cinema scenes, but way back in history, and they managed to evolve out of it. But Vietnamese films, they still have this bug now, is that whenever 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 an element that could benefit from cinematic language, just from imagery, just from compositions that can speak, that can reach out to the audiences, Vietnamese films or Vietnamese creatives, they would always revert back to, saying it out loud and saying it outright. Subtext will always become text. And so that is, I would say that is a very like international audience deterrent kind of ideal because whenever you speak too much, suddenly I feel like subconsciously for global audiences, they would always see that if they keep talking, then I guess then I need to learn their language a little bit to really understand this film. And so I'm going to tune myself out. And it will get to a point where they're completely disengaged with the experience. And so Vietnamese movies, they really need to realize that, imagery has power and imagery has universal values. You don't need to say every single thing that comes to mind or every single thing about the culture out loud or through dialogue for people to quote unquote get what you're saying. And that's how I would say that's how a lot of films let's just cite an example right now. Parasite by Bong Joon-ho. It is a very local story with very local elements, but then if you really take a step back and you notice, that film managed to find the success and accolades that it has strictly because its imagery was doing a lot of the talking. It is a very local story with very universal or global visuals or imagery. And so that's how we can level up. It is a very simple process, but I would say that it may be just too subtle for a lot of creatives to see right now.
Another question or two. If someone's listening and they would like to try to get into Vietnamese cinema, or maybe they know a little bit and would like to learn more, what do you think are some like essential contemporary Vietnamese movies that people should try to check out?
How many films do I get to choose, Michael?
Let's say 4 or 5.
4 or 5. All right. That's cool.
Yeah.
And well, the reason that I'm asking is that I always I always prepare myself with 15 titles that I would like to recommend to people, but then out of those 15, I have to take into consideration like which titles are the ones that you can have sort of immediate access to because otherwise what's the use of recommending you some
Sure.
titles and then realizing that oh wait there's no way that you can watch this. So I have all right, let's start with I would say firstly The Rebel from Charlie Nguyen. It's the Vietnamese title is Dòng máu anh hùng. I would say it's a delicious action film, and it's also one of those rare occasions where the martial arts form that you see on screen it is very Vietnamese. It's a Va Vietnam, and that is something that I'm very proud of. And in fact, there's a more modern Vietnamese action film called Fury. The Vietnamese title is Hai Phượng, and also apparently it also stars the principal actress of The Rebel as well, Veronica Ngo. And Fury also features Va Vietnam on screen, but however, I would say that in terms of like the groundbreaking factor, the Rebel is the way to go.
Yeah, I've seen Fury. It was a very, very entertaining.
There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you for loving it. All right, moving on. The second film is which one? Which one am I thinking of? Oh, it's Song Lang. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
That film is an excellent. representative of where Vietnamese cinema can be in terms of like combining the cultural story with a cinematic story. Like those two can coexist, and I would say Song Lang is the proof. And for the uninitiated, Song Lang is a film about a debt collector who has interest in the art form of cải lương or Vietnamese opera. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna stop. I think I'm just gonna stop that. The rest is a very compelling and a very emotional and obviously a very beautiful journey as well that I really think
Mhm.
you should at least experience once in your life. So third film I would go for is so the moon at the bottom of the well. The Vietnamese title of it is Trăng nơi đáy giếng. It's a romance drama produced in 2008. And it tells the story of a woman named Hạnh who loves her husband with all her heart. But then basically, when you realize that sometimes the things that you love the most don't really love you back. So what do you do with it? I think I would say that it is very stirring. And I can't remember the last time I was so stirred by a film. Oh, and also, if I may add, the moon at the bottom of the well is out of those recommendations that I've given. The moon at the bottom of the well is from a native Vietnamese director as opposed to a Việt kiều or Vietnamese overseas directors. So yeah, those are the three that I would love for you to seek out.
Okay, great. I'll have to, like I said, I've seen Song Lang, which I liked a lot, and I believe is on Netflix, right? At least it used to be. But I'll put those in the show notes and try to include some links for maybe where people could find them as well.
Actually, Michael, I'm sorry if I may add another to the list.
Yeah, go for it.
So sorry, I'm being greedy here.
No, no.
But I really believe that 2025 is going to be the year where maybe we're gonna see a Vietnamese film or maybe a film from Vietnam appearing in the in the Criterion collection
Oh, wow, that would be awesome.
or at least on the Criterion channel. Yeah, and if anything, that is also another title that I'd like to recommend to people as well. It's Three Seasons from another Vietnamese American filmmaker, Tony Boy. It's three simultaneous stories about three characters who are in Saigon right at the time when Vietnam was going through, especially Saigon, is experiencing the biggest change in its history. This is around 1996 when I believe then President Bill Clinton, decided to lift the embargo. So yeah, there's that too.
Okay, okay, great. That sounds. I haven't heard of that one. I will definitely look that up. And then just in closing, I guess we can kind of circle back to talking about you a bit more. You mentioned when we met a few weeks back that you're getting into screenplay writing. Did you just want to tell listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. A little bit embarrassed, but okay. Well, I'll share. So after a two-digit kind of stint, I would say, being a film critic and at the same time a subtitle provider for Vietnamese films as well, an English subtitle provider for Vietnamese films. I decided to try my hand at screenwriting just to see just to challenge myself, just to freshen my creative juices, so to speak. But also at the same time, I believe that it is it is sort of a, I don't know how you say it, a natural attraction to it. Like personally, it's a natural attraction to it because from researching and from reading up a lot about, the industry, I find that, everybody is in need of a good story. Or, to be even more blunt, they say that, there's a scarcity for good screenplays on the market at the moment. And so I decided to, with what I've learned and with what I've filmed, maybe I could jump in and, do some diagnosing and just see where it is that can be improved, where it is that, which are the areas that require tweaking and fixing, so to speak. And so the screenplay that I'm co-working on is called Portrait of a Misty Sun, with a group of young filmmakers called Spring Authors. The Vietnamese title of the film is called Hỏa nắng trong sương. It is in the script stage at the moment. However, we are really, 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 and did I say really? Really hoping to film it sometime later in the year, just so that it can grace you all on the big screen by the end of 2025, or perhaps it could become a third film. It could become a Lunar New Year release in 2026. The project is about two young artists of an art school in Hanoi of the Indochina College of Fine Arts. They love each other and then they love the arts that they're making. But however, when political turmoil arrives, they will find that everything that they love might be tested. I would say that you can read more about it on the etc., where they've done coverage of the project, and I'm still very, it's still a very surreal feeling to see that. Oh, hey, well, this is something that I worked on, but not as a critic. This is something I worked on as a creative.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean that's a fascinating way to see different sides of the industry. And I'll be sure to include a link to that article, the Viet Center article, in the show notes. But yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, best of luck with that moving forward, and look forward to hearing more about it, and hopefully seeing the movie as that moves along.
Thank you so much.
Well, Nguyen, thanks so much for taking the time to talk today. Really appreciate learning more about your career in Vietnamese movies. I admittedly I need to make a better effort to watch more Vietnamese movies, considering I live here, and I'll certainly start with that list you provided. So yeah, thanks again. Really enjoyed talking to you.
All right. Well, again, Michael, thank you so much for having me on. And obviously, yeah, if you need any movie recommendations, domestic or abroad, just ask me. Just give me a text, and I'll be more than happy to provide you some.
All right, sounds great. Have a good one. That's it for this episode of the Vietnam Weekly podcast. Connect with Vietnam Weekly on Threads, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate or review the show on your preferred podcast platform, and see you next week.